guys, how's everybody doing today? Just getting some of my materials ready here. Figured actually finished some work early today, and so this has been sitting on my commission pile for a while. It seemed like a good reason to fire up the live stream. And this one should be pretty fun, I think. It's a corner box, but not based on an actual corner box, you know, except for the number and box design. But the storm drawing's a different drawing. Planning to put some screen tone on this drawing too. So hopefully this one will be a pretty fun one to watch. Maxwell, targeted demographic for Street Angel. Street Angel is rated teen, and I think, I'm never sure if it's 13 or 12, but it's you know, it's like a PG movie equivalent, and I think Image's guidelines, I think it's 12 years old, is what they say for rated teen books, but I don't think there's anything too objectionable. I usually tell people if they're thinking about getting it for their kids to just kind of maybe read it first if, you know, if they're worried about any content, but it's mostly cartoony violence. Cliff, my feelings on the young market. I'm actually, it's one of the, I think, good news stories of comics. I think there's a lot of stuff that everybody complains about in comics, but the young market is great because it's a new generation of readers. So, you know, if you get them whenever they're young and and they learn to love comic books, it'll take me into retirement then. So I like the idea of comics. You know, I guess they'd be all ages comics, be even younger than young adult comics, and it's grown a lot in the last several years, and it's one of those things I think we've talked about on Kayfabe. In the 90s, like that demographic was really lost in a lot of ways. There wasn't too much produced for them. You know, if you think about the books that were selling, say in Wizard and a lot of the speculator books, like they just weren't for young readers. And so it's nice to see publishers targeting that group because, like, we need readers, you know, almost everything I think about in terms of comics is we need readers, and it doesn't mean everything needs to be made for young readers. However, some stuff needs to be made for young readers. So I'm pretty excited by the last couple of years and the amount of material that's being created for that group. And it's cool to see some of them really selling in big numbers. You know, it suggests that plenty of young readers actually like comics. And if you look at something like Japan and manga, that was always a very strong market in Japan. And then, you know, it leads to people growing up and continuing to read comics. So I'm pretty excited for it. Martyr Media, I really don't know what to think about distribution plans. One, I just don't know enough about it. It'd be pretty ill-informed if I had anything to say. Anything that targets more readers, I think, is a great idea. How that works out, I don't know. It's really hard to imagine what things are going to look like after this all blows over in terms of comic book stores and distribution. So I'm in the same boat as the rest of you guys. I'm eager to see what happens, but I don't have any idea what that will look like. I've met lots of comic book retailers over the years, from store appearances to just being a fan and collector and stuff. And, they're like any other industry. There are a lot of really smart people working in comics retail, so I have a lot more faith in them in terms of figuring out ways through this and solutions and alternatives. And it seems like a lot of publishers are now more open to those alternatives. So I am optimistic that the way people love comics and the smart people that I think are involved in this business in different roles, interesting solutions will come out of this. I don't think it will be easy, but, what's easy? Yeah, I used to get comics, from the newsstand in my town. I grew up in a small town that didn't have a comic book store, and there was just kind of like what passed for a newsstand, and that's where I would get comics, and it was still New Comics Day and stuff. But whenever I started reading, like, you could get them everywhere. I used to get them at gas stations and, places like that. Probably the first Wolverine comic I ever got, I remember distinctly getting it at a gas station kind of close to my house. So it'd be nice if comics were more available like that, but I don't know. The comic book format itself has some issues that I could see it changing and evolving a bit from all of this. My next project is probably going to be a comic book. I just finished one before all of this stuff happened. So I love that format, but I don't know if it's the right format as the default format. I mean, I guess if I had to say, I would say it's not the right format as a default. You know, it was conceived, it worked because it was so cheap, and it's just not so cheap anymore. And also because there were outlets to sell it everywhere. And again, those outlets aren't really there. David King, what's up, man? Amir, I hope you're right about having a bunch of Kayfabers by the time this is over. Numbers have been going well. I appreciate you guys sharing and stuff because the audience continues to grow, and that's awesome. It's the reason that we do it. We've been trying to post more videos, you know, since we know everybody's at home right now and looking for things to watch, so. How's everybody managing all this at home time? You guys doing all right out there? I imagine everybody's making their comics. If you're a cartoonist or some other creative, like, you may have some extra time right now. Robert, I don't know of a book that's just pencils. Occasionally you can find pencils reproduced. It's not comic book pages, but there's a Kirby book. I think it's called Heroes and Villains, and it was a sketchbook that he made for Roz Kirby, his wife, I think as an anniversary gift at some point. And it was a bunch of Kirby pencil drawings, you know, of characters that he had made. It's a really cool book, and it's been printed a couple of times. So that's potentially a book you could get and then copy the pages or print them out on blue paper or lightbox them and ink over top of those. But I mean, in today's day and age with online, you know, social media, you should be able to just reach out. And if you're looking for penciled pages, I imagine if you post that on your social media, people will have plenty of pages for you. And if you're good at inking, you may be able to find several pencilers that are actually looking for an inker right now. Hey, Amanda, how you doing? Oh man, Keith Perkins building a greenhouse. I have been thinking about gardening a lot lately. Where I live, it's tough because I don't have a fenced-in area, and we have a lot of wildlife in this area. So usually what happens is I plant stuff, and it grows fairly well, and then one day I wake up and it's all consumed by animals. Or maybe by Bigfoots, right, Amanda? Oh yeah, David, that's a great book, The Kirby Pencils and Inks from IDW, I think, put it out. Sort of like their artist editions. That would be a good one to practice on. David King. I am aware of one Bigfoot sighting, maybe two, where I live / grew up. So it's not too common here, no. Although there is a Bigfoot convention that happens within an hour and a half of where I live, and it's like a 3-day convention. I have not been there yet, but one of these days I will, hopefully. Dave Crossland, how you doing, man? Martyr Media, Tom Scioli, some of his stuff is straight to pencils. Some of my stuff is straight to pencils, by the way. Like some of my Street Angel books are just penciled, not inked. David, I don't know about Fife. Some of his mark making is I love it. It's really interesting, but I don't always know what it is. It wouldn't surprise me if he does stuff and keeps some pencil in because it seems like he has a lot of different textures in his work. He seems like a guy who values those textures, so he may be experimenting and drawing from pencil and keeping some of that in his work. It would not surprise me, but I don't know for sure. I find that the pencil works really well with digital coloring because pencil adds a certain, it adds a texture, and somehow that I think integrates well with the digital coloring to have some of that texture. Yeah, I'd like to talk to Fife, on our on Kayfabe. Like we've done panels and stuff, and he's always somebody that's fun to talk to whenever I see him at a show or anywhere. Great, great mind when it comes to comics and thinking about comics and making comics. Let's see. Do I do the whole book in pencils versus inks, or just depending on the situation? In the case of Street Angel, like I would do some of the stories, if they were in pencil, it would be the whole issue so that it looked unified. I can imagine saving that for a certain technique, like I did the Guild, and part of the Guild was done in pencil only, like the fantasy sequences, to give it a different look. So, but all the Street Angel stuff fits in pencil. It's all in pencil. Do I prep pencil art differently than ink? Yeah, the stuff that I would do that was going to be reproduced from the pencils, I would basically do a page kind of rough, um, almost like I might pencil a page if I were going to ink it. But if it was going to be in pencils, then I would probably go to a light box and and trace and clean it up. Basically doing like what you do with ink, but I would be doing it in pencil. So I'd have a nice, clean, finished art to reproduce. So yeah, a little bit different. What pen nib would I recommend to start with for beginners? Pen nibs are challenging. I grabbed a couple whenever I read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and I was probably 12 or 13. And I had such a bad experience with the pen nibs that I quit using them. Like I thought I just can't figure that out. And so then I inked with cheap brushes for a long time, which worked out all right. I got very comfortable inking with the brush as a result. And then whenever I found Dave Cooper's art and talked to him and found out that he was doing a lot of stuff, what I consider magic looking stuff with the Hunt 102, that's whenever I really got back into trying to use it. So I don't know. Some people think pen nibs are easier than brushes, and some people feel the opposite. And also you can draw with anything now. So I don't know. Pen nibs are a funny thing. Inking is not what it used to be in terms of a necessity. So now you just, if you're inking with pen nibs, it's a real choice as opposed to that's how it's done. So I don't know. I guess start with a Hunt 102 or maybe like a G pen or something, which is kind of similar. But I don't know. Maybe buy a bunch of pen nibs and experiment. That's my new answer. Yeah. I don't think there is one particular pen nib you should start with. Patrick Rooks. Let's see. I get my brushes somewhere online, like Dick Blick or Utrecht or something like that. And they're the Raphael. I always get this every time I have some kind of inking online. But they're the Raphael 8404s are my choice for brush. I don't know if you've gotten these, Patrick, and like they arrive split. That was my problem with the Windsor Series 7 that's so legendary. Every time I got hold of one, it was already, like it didn't work from the get-go. And I've just had much better luck with, I don't know if it's the manufacturing or if it's just bad luck, but the Raphaels have always turned out better for me than the Winsor Newtons. To the point of I've never had a Winsor Newton that wasn't split pretty much from the get-go. So you can get Winsor Newtons lots of places. I would just look online if you don't have a good art store nearby. Hey Keith, is Rosemary and Company brushes, are they out of the UK? There was a brush maker out of the UK that I remember reading about that was supposed to be really great and actually affordable brushes, but very high quality. And that name sounds familiar to me. Amanda, the red sable hair Kolinsky brushes. So that comes out of Russia, the Kolinsky red sable hair. And I think there was, I don't know, some kind of trade embargo or something with them. So it would not surprise me if some of this stuff is, is not legitimate. Because like, how would any of us know? I don't know that I could tell the difference. But it definitely became sort of tricky for a little while because there was some kind of trade issue with it. And maybe there still is. I honestly don't know. I end up buying, like, I infrequently buy art supplies, and whenever I do, I buy a lot. So, half a dozen brushes or something like that. And then I don't have to buy any for a while. So I have a few extra brushes in my drawer. Bought like a gallon of ink one time whenever I had ink that I really liked. And the ink is organic, so if it will go bad. It'll spoil essentially, and then it smells like death, and it's pretty gross. But what are you gonna do? David, you asked about overdoing the inking, the texture on the leather. I don't know, I mean, it's pretty organic, so I don't know if you would really overdo it. Like, I like having some spontaneity, and because leather is an organic surface, like, I think if you overdid it without like spilling your ink on it, it would probably be okay. Kirk Stevenson, tell us more about that Junji Ito book. I wasn't aware of an art book coming out from him. What's in it? When's it coming out? What do you know? Yeah, I don't think Sharpies are the best. They're certainly not archival. I also, I use crappy materials because, like, it's production art for me. It's whenever I do a commission or something that I try to be a little bit more archival about stuff, although not always. Like, ballpoint pen drawings are the opposite of archival. I had a show of ballpoint pen drawings in LA a few years ago, and like everybody that bought a piece, I would feel guilty and have to explain to them, like, it may be blank in a couple of years. Hopefully they're okay, but that stuff is the opposite of archival for sure. J Cap, thank you for super chat. Yeah, Street Angel was Tiger King before Tiger King. Mike Mignola uses Sharpies and Pigma microns. Are you sure? Hey, Massive Panda, thanks for the super chat. Yeah, I don't know if I can get Jamie Hewlett out of my out of my system. I think you're always going to see some Jamie Hewlett influence in my art. It's funny, like he's somebody that if I really like somebody's work, I actually try to stop looking at it because I don't want to assimilate too much stuff, and he's one of those people. There's an artist edition of Jaime's work where you can see his, you can see the actual, a bunch of his pages reproduced at size. So I did know that 11 by 14. The Street Angel that had the Clausian back cover was Volume 1, Number 2, I think. Anybody that doesn't know those books, I used to draw back covers in the styles of various artists who I couldn't afford to pay for pinups. But I always liked seeing other artists do characters I liked, so I would sort of ape their different artist styles to create a hopefully fun back cover. Patrick, what was it like working on the next issue project with Larson? Pretty hands off. I think I got an email asking if I wanted to do it. And anybody at home, like, this has been 10 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. But it was just, an email invitation and then the character and issue and stuff that I would get, and however many pages and dimensions. So he didn't, it wasn't a real editorially driven thing, at least not in my experience. I can't remember if I even turned anything in besides the finished piece. I don't know that there was script approval or anything like that. It's been a while. That is a project that didn't get a lot of attention. Pretty fun, but not the most popular book I've done. Aiden, I don't have a lot of old art of mine. I've gotten rid of most of my art from before I was 18. I regret it. So if you guys know young artists or anybody that's thinking about getting rid of their artwork or anything, I would discourage them because you might feel differently in the future. But I've made a bunch of zines, and so I'm slowly trying to photograph and make videos about some of those zines for Cartoonist Kayfabe. So you'll see some, art that informs where I'm at and what I make and shows some sign of development and growth and experimentation and stuff like that. It'll just be a bit different than, like that 1,000 crappy pages video that Ed did. And I'm not that active in sketchbooks. You'd be disappointed in my sketchbooks. They're almost all notes and very few sketches. Hey, John, thanks for the super chat. Amir, what are my top 5 artist editions? All right. David Mazzucchelli's Born Again is really good. There's different qualities that I like in artist editions. So I have a few of the Jack Kirby fourth world artist editions, and honestly, they're not my favorite because they almost look like black and white photocopies. Royer's inks, you know, Royer's my favorite inker of Kirby, but they're so clean that it really is like a black and white, you know, reproduction. So compared to that, Mazzucchelli's Daredevil Born Again, the pages are yellowed, there's screen tone, there's whiteout, you know, there's all kinds of different techniques on display, and you can see it all in that artist edition. You know, the pages really feel like you're looking at the pages, and that there's a lot to decode there, a lot of difference from the printed piece to the finished piece. So that's a really good one. Mike Mignola's Hellboy in Hell artist edition. He has two artist editions out, I believe, and one of them is Hellboy in Hell, and I love it. It's my favorite version of Hellboy in Hell, and I compare that to the digital version, which is really good because the colors are stronger in the digital version, I believe, on a nice screen like an iPad screen, than they are in print, where red is just a dark color. So in print, you know, it's kind of a dark version. But the Hellboy in Hell artist edition has no text in it. And usually I like lettering on the original art, but with the Hellboy in Hell story, it reminds me of Jim Woodring's Frank, and it works really good, you know, wordlessly and in black and white. Like his art, just the size, everything is perfect on that one. So that's a really good one. After that, man, I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton of them. Dan Clowes is one of my favorite cartoonists, so you know they just released that Vault edition. It's really strong. The McFarlane Spawn Vault edition, really strong. The Marvel Covers one is amazing, especially because of all the different artists that you get to see. Some great Sam Keith stuff in that one. You know, another artist who puts a lot on the page, and his Max edition is really good for that. But I feel like I'm forgetting some that are standouts. The first one I ever bought was Wally Wood, and I did not plan to buy artist editions because they were expensive and oversized and all this stuff. And Pittsburgh Comics, a great comic book store here in Pittsburgh, had the Wally Wood artist edition. I stopped in for something. I can't remember why I went there one day because it's on the other side of town. It's not my regular store, but it's a really great shop. And as soon as I looked at that Wally Wood artist edition, like I had to give him my credit card because it's just stunning. If you've never seen it, it's absolutely gorgeous. There's a there's a Mad artist edition that's really good. There's a few of those EC artist editions that are outstanding. Yeah, the Steranko one is very nice. The Bill Sienkiewicz was like it was on my short list for the artist editions I most wanted, and it reproduces the entire issue of Elektra Assassin. So that one is pretty spectacular. I still feel like I'm forgetting some that are maybe my top 5. Ronin is really great. You know, Frank Miller was a guy that I was super into for a while, and Dark Knight Returns, that artist edition is pretty spectacular because you get to see things like comparing some of Klaus Jansson's inking choices with stuff that Frank Miller redrew. So that one's pretty exceptional. You know what, David? I like Frank Thorne's I like Frank Thorne's work and a lot of stuff. And that Red Sonja stuff's really interesting because he does so much himself. I think he might even letter some of that, but I've never seen that one in person. And Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X is sort of my dream artist edition that I wish somebody would make. Tim Truman Scout would be pretty awesome too. Tim Truman Dragon Chang would be pretty awesome, especially with all that zip or duo shade stuff. I think that would look really cool now. Maxwell, I don't know. I don't know Carlos Esquera's work that well, so I'm not sure. Maybe. I've never heard that there's another 50 pages of unpublished Weapon X, and now I really, really am desperate to see that. Dude, Ed's artist edition is fantastic. Having commentary on every page is really smart, and then what he includes is really great because it's more than just one book, so you end up seeing a lot of different excellent stuff. For what I like in an artist edition, I'm pretty impressed by his artist edition. One that I personally like, but it contradicts what I said about Mike Royer's inks, and that is the Charles Burns Black Hole artist edition, which, talk about perfect inking, like it doesn't even make sense. But that artwork looks really great in that oversize, so that's why I like it so much. Very fun to see at that big size. The EC, one of the EC artist editions, it has like it's like Best of EC or something, and it has a couple of Kriegstein stories in it, so that's pretty exciting. The Toth and Ditko Erie collections are fantastic. I agree 100%. Same with the Corbin. Those collections are really great. They're affordable. I love those collections. I keep them in my upstairs shelves. Which is the better, where I keep the stuff I tend to look at the most. All right, I think it's ready now for screen tone. I'm gonna go rinse out this brush, give it a second to dry before I get into erasing these pencils, and then I'm gonna try to put the screen tone on. So if you guys are into screen tone, zip-a-tone, that kind of thing, and you're interested to watch some of that get applied, hang tight for a few minutes. I will return. You know what's an interesting artist? It's not an artist edition, but it reproduces original art. It's the Glenn Bray collection. So Fantagraphics put out a collection of his collection. It's a big hardcover book. It's not quite full size like artist editions, but it's 4-color reproduction of a bunch of original art, and it's like 400 pages or more, and it's almost everybody. Like whatever artist you would think of, it's in there, especially from indie stuff. So Hernandez Brothers, Klaus, Chris Ware, Crumb, all the underground guys I think are represented in his collection, and it's a really nice collection. There's a lot of text that goes along with it, giving some context to the different pieces and things. It's a pretty neat book. Yeah, Blighted Eye. And he probably was in that Sokolski movie. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing him, but he's a big collector of that Polish sculptor. You know, he doesn't just collect comic book art, although that's the thing, you know, that's the reason I know of his collection. Glenn Bray. Who did I say? Yeah, I have a sad story about that Corbin book in France. I didn't pick it up whenever I was in France at that exhibition. It was for Angoulême. He was one of the like the featured artists there. So they had a great exhibition, which I did get to go to, but I did not pick up a copy of the book, and it sold out. David, I did a little bit of lettering for the Ogden Whitney book. Um, is that your first time reading Ogden Whitney? I'm a huge Ogden Whitney fan, and I actually had bootleg copy of that book like 10 years ago because originally Picture Box was working on it. And so one year for something or other, my wife knew that I liked it, and she found out that um, I think I think Frank Santoro had a copy of like the stories they were planning to do. And so she got Frank to make like a Xerox set of the stories for a holiday one year, probably Christmas or my birthday or something. So I've been I really like the Ogden Whitney stuff a lot, and like his lettering, pretty much everything. So whenever they started putting together that book, they asked me about doing some of the cover lettering and stuff. So I don't have too much to do with it, but I do like the book a lot. Yeah, Patty, this is Zipatone's a name brand, sort of like Kleenex or Xerox, but it's screen tone. So it's what this stuff is. This is by a different company. This is the leader because Zipatone's out of business, and I guess you can still probably find some old Zipatone maybe on eBay or something. But this is the same concept basically as Zipatone would be. Duo Shade or Duotone, I've never used. I'm aware of it, and I've looked at some of it. It's hard to come by, and the chemicals I think are pretty bad news, so I've never really used them. Scott, you're right. I'm going to try scraping. We'll see what that does. See if I'm happy with the results of that. I don't know about the scraping. I think I want a little bit more white coverage than that. John, I don't know what brand of pen that is. It's not great. I'm actually going to try some white acrylic paint. Here's the pen. It says Jelly Roll Medium, Sakura, Japan. I don't know if you can see that. It's okay, but I'm not thrilled with the amount of coverage, so I'm going to try something else, and we'll see. I probably won't be happy with it either. White is the bane of my existence when it comes to making marks on paper. Kurt, that's awesome to hear, man. Glad your sister's into comics. Very cool that Street Angel is her gateway. All right, I think this is probably about it. So thank you guys as always for tuning in. Hope you have a nice Saturday night. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night. And I'll probably post a maybe a scan or something of this later on. But yeah, Jordan, I'm afraid this one's already taken. This was actually a Patreon person had reached out to me for this, and it felt like it would be fun to draw. And a lot of what I am drawing right now I can't share with you guys, but I do like drawing in front of everybody. So this was a good excuse to do a live stream. So take care, everybody. Be safe, and we'll see you in future Cartoonist Kayfabes. Have a great weekend.